飞达教育成立20周年，在这个喜庆的日子呢，我们其实飞达的学生也迎来了一个丰收的年份。我们今年有将近50%的学生进入了全美前25的名校。飞达为什么能够做成这个样子呢？因为我们不仅仅是帮学生在学业上进步，做 SAT 的培训，升学规划，培养他们全面的能力、社会责任感和感恩的心。不管这个美国的这个升学的动向有多变化，更重要的是，他们不仅仅是进入心中理想的名校，他们也成为了华裔的精英。
迎接开学季除了这个家长要担心孩子到底有没有办法能够整个这个恢复信心ready 开学之后呢，很多暑假期间的科研报告也要把这个报告做好。那到底为什么这个特别的重要？我们今天呢请到了飞达教育的创始人也就是魏新魏老师来我们做一个详细的说明。
飞达教育日前举办了斯高鲍先生的国会竞选启动会，
吸引了众多社区成员参与，共同支持并参与这场有意义的市民活动。
此次竞选启动会不仅是一次政治支持的呼吁，更是一次充满活力的社区聚会，旨在培养市民责任感，并提供丰富的志愿者机会。活动期间，飞达教育宣布为与会者提供一系列志愿者和实习职位，帮助他们赚取可用于申请总统志愿服务奖 PVSA 的志愿服务小时。飞达教育的发言人表示，今天的活动是社区成员直接参与政治进程并理解积极参与重要性的绝佳机会。
为什么飞达教育会支持斯高鲍先生呢？这个我们的渊源很久的。那讲到2014年的时候，当时有 SCA5，可能大家都记得，那个时候就是加大想通过这个名额配额的限制，这个亚裔的学生的进入加大的这个情况。然后呢，他带领跟那个 Bob Hoff 一起 ，Bob Hoff 是在参院，他在众议院，他们两个一起联手打退了这个 SCA5 的对亚裔的这个不平等的这个法案。所以他从14年到现在24年，差不多10年了，他其实一直都在做这些事情。高鲍先生他愿意出来这个选国会议员，那我们亚裔家长是应该坚决支持的，因为他也多次说到说，这个大学申请应该是择优录取，而不是看你的皮肤的颜色来录取。这个我想跟我们大部分的或者绝大部分的亚裔家长的这个观念是一致的。所以为什么说每一个为了我们的下一代我们都应该支持斯高鲍先生？所以希望飞达的老师、同学和家长们，我们一起来支持这个斯高鲍先生。
And so many of our colleges will say, well, we have too many Asians. We need to have affirmative action program for different races. I don't believe that at all. I believe the people that work the hardest and do the best and get the highest score should get the admission. And that's what makes America great.
因为他们明白自己身上的使命，就像斯坦福大学在2025计划上所说的那样 ，Declare a mission, not a major。斯坦福大学要的孩子，就是要知道自己身上肩负的使命，而不仅仅只是做一个精致的利己主义者。这就是为什么每年飞达都有很多的学生被斯坦福和一流顶尖的名校录取。其实我们飞达，我们并不挑学生你成绩特别好，考试特别高，我把你招进来。其实飞达的学生里边也有非常普通的孩子，而且我们特别骄傲的就是通过飞达老师的帮助，能够把这些看似很普通的孩子能够打造成有社会影响力，而且很成熟、有社会责任感的年轻人。现在升学压力特别的大，竞争也很激烈，有很多原因造成的，一个是疫情，一个是这个美国的政治倾向越来越左，然后一流的名校都排挤亚裔，但是飞达的亚裔学生依然能够进入心中理想的名校。它的秘诀到底在哪里呢？其实我们飞达教育不仅仅在升学规划和升学指导过程中间提供资讯给家长，更重要的是我们还提供各种平台和资源给到飞达的学生。我们跟富兰克林教育基金会合作，为我们的高中生提供跟大学教授科研专家做这个研究项目，当然也包括理工科电脑科技最新的 AI 和 machine learning， 还有商科，还有文科、艺术等等各个方面，让我们的高中生在高中的时候就能够展现他们的才华，展现出跟与众不同的地方。除了这个科学研究项目之外呢， 我们还跟在飞达学习中心各地的这些政府和这个 county 还有大学有紧密的合作。比方说今年我们在 UCI 的工程学院计算机的教授合作，我们有选派优秀的学生去 UCI 做这个计算机上面的实习工作，这对于高中生来说也是非常非常难得的。除此之外呢，我们还给市长、市议员还有这个各级的评选官员的办公室输送飞达优秀的学生，提供有20多门 AP 的学分课程。因为很多的孩子在高中他选不到 AP 课，或者在学校 AP 课没有上好，他们都可以利用富兰克林高中这个平台把自己的 GPA 全面的提升。最后呢，更重要的一点 leadership， 我们叫领导力。就像斯坦福大学前副校长米勒博士，他也是飞达的天使投资人。他有一次跟飞达的家长和同学们分享的时候说，对于斯坦福来讲，领导力意味着为人民服务，就是 leadership equals service。在飞达20年来一直寻求这条路，我们从2004年到现在2024年，开拓了中国的贫困地区，还有哥斯达黎加，还有尼泊尔，还有肯尼亚的各项义工 leadership 的领导力的项目，微金融 P2P microfinance， 有生物多样性 biodiversity wildlife conservation 人权 human rights 和孤儿院重建等等项目。飞达的孩子通过这样的平台开阔了眼界，理解了自己身上的责任，有了一颗感恩的心。所以飞达在这么多年我们搭建了这个平台，这也是为什么说飞达的学生最后能够真的是去到他们理想的名校。
In the Sky Island wilderness, every inch of land tells the miracle of life. And I, once an ordinary student, am now its witness and guardian. Just a month ago, I was buried in academic work. Then, an email changed everything. Arizona Biodiversity Conservation Project. Those words pulled me out of my routine. Without knowing much about ecology, I signed up. Stepping onto Arizona's sacred land felt like entering another world. The air, the colors, everything was different. In the Sonoran Desert, the towering cacti were like skyscrapers, each an ecosystem. But the human impact was clear. Dried water sources, injured animals, ecological imbalance everywhere. Small actions can bring change. Watering plants, bandaging animals. These simple acts made me feel responsible. Meeting passionate environmentalists inspired me. I joined them, becoming an active participant in conservation. As night fell, we set up infrared cameras, hoping to spot jaguars, once abundant, now nearly extinct. Every photo was a surprise, but the jaguar remained elusive. In the San Pedro River Valley, the green ribbon of life faces challenges from climate change and development guided by top scientists. I learned professional field research skills.
Better than most of the college groups I teach. Yes, we need to bring you back next time I teach college students.
This wasn't just a scientific journey. It was about finding harmony between humans and nature. Opening new horizons.
When I think about the world
interacting with the local community taught me the importance of balancing nature, conservation, and human needs. From the mountaintop, I saw the true meaning of biodiversity: complex, fragile, interconnected. This journey transformed me. It inspired curiosity and reverence for nature. Now, it's your turn. Join us. Become the next guardian of nature and contribute to the planet's future. Arizona Biodiversity Conservation Project. Start your extraordinary journey. This is a story of discovery, responsibility, and hope. And it's just beginning.
Hello，各位家长，大家好。可以看得到我们的屏幕吗？
好像看不到。
看得到，好的。好的，那我们今天就讲座开始。各位家长，大家好，欢迎来到 Ivy Max 每个月的第1个星期五，当然我们这一次是第2个星期五。对，我们呢这一次是第122期的公益教育讲座，我是来自于 Cupertino 中心的李老师 Isabel 李老师。
大家晚上好，我是来自 Cupertino 中心的 Amy 老师。
对，欢迎大家。今天是一个非常重要的主题哦，我们会讲到2024年如何在文书中脱颖而出，记制的一个很重要的一个关键点。
好，那我们来看一下今天的 agenda。那首先呢，我们会给大家介绍近期我们比较独特的 STEM 相关的一些活动。那今天主要的一个主题会给大家 Demo Common App 以及 Collation App 这2个学生最常用的一个申请平台的一个 demo 的展示，来帮助大家熟悉这些平台的使用。那我们今天还邀请到了张校长和 Sebastian 老师来给我们介绍一下现在今年最新公布的文书选题以及 Supplemental Essay 的 prompt。还有如何在文书中脱颖而出、一击制胜的一些策略。那咱们首先来看一下现在的最近的一个 STEM 活动，Isabel 老师要不要介绍一下？
好啊，可以的，谢谢 Amy 老师。对，这就是如同刚刚 Amy 老师说到，就是一个比较 unique 一个 STEM 的活动。Ivy Max 其实这10几年以来一直都是在跟这个 CASPA， 就是北美半导体协会有合作。那我们这一次合作的只是我们合作其中一个项目叫 Ham Radio， 这是在做这个无线电，对，无线电。然后呢，因为这个是一连串的一个 project， 像他们这个星期天，我们的学生还有还有他们的学生呢，就是我们会到外面去发射这个无线电，所以在上周跟上上周的时候，他们都是一直在比如说做这个电线啊，然后呢，他们有很多的小组活动。那同时呢，因为 Ivy Max 本身就有一个学生社团，就是 Ham Radio 学生社团，他们除了平常要准备考这个 Ham Radio 的证照之外，他们也会去带领着社区的学生做这些无线电方面的这种 project， 是相当有意义的。对 STEM 比较感兴趣的学生，对于动手能力感兴趣的学生，其实不用说10年级，10岁之后感兴趣的话，都可以欢迎打到各学习中心去询问这个社团怎么样去加入。对，那另外还有就是说，我们跟这个CASPA 就是北美半导体协会呢，在今年也一起合作了这个科学展览会哦，这个叫 Science and Engineering Fair。那在这个展览会呢，是当天我们有个评选的时间是在8月17号，也就是下个星期六。那对于对这个科研感兴趣，或者是说不一定要 STEM。如果说你是对比如说 business 感兴趣啊，或者是 humanity 感兴趣，但是你曾经有做过相关的一些 research 的一些主题，都欢迎您可以把这个做好的这个录像跟视频，然后交到各大学习中心的你可以找主要的老师，然后 我们可以在8月17号当天做一个评选，然后做一个小小的竞赛，这样子。对，那如果你想要了解细节的话，你现在可以拿起你的手机，然后扫一下这个 QR code， 然后看一下就是参赛的这个资格啊，还有参赛的办法怎么样去做。对，这个就是我刚刚讲的 Ham Radio 的学生社团哈。那当然我们学生社团很多，这个话题我们就把它留到最后，感兴趣的都可以跟我们学习中心的老师一起来询问。好，那我们就特别欢迎我们今天的这个主讲嘉宾张校长。我们今天会有2个主讲嘉宾，第一个主讲嘉宾是张校长，第二个主讲嘉宾呢是我们的这个 Sebastian 老师。那张校长是 Ivy Max 的校长，对，同时也是 Co-founder， 也是最资深的文书老师之一。好，欢迎张校长。
谢谢李老师，谢谢 Amy 老师，
谢谢。
谢谢。对，咱们先来看一段录像，好不好？
好，我们先来看一下录像。这个录像是刚好张校长是您的学生。
对，
对，
他分享完了之后，我会来再分享一些他的小故事。
好的，对，这位学生呢，他是 UPenn 的优秀毕业生。那我们也多看一下学生的成功案例嘛。好。
Hi, my name is Lauren, and I just graduated from the University of Pennsylvania's Wharton School with a degree in economics this past May. I would definitely say that Ivy Max played a critical role in allowing me to achieve my dream of going to the Wharton School for Business, because they were there for me every step of the way from beginning to end of the whole college application process. For example, when I was just starting high school and choosing my classes, Ivy Max gave me a lot of guidance on being able to select the right classes that would allow me to have a well-rounded academic experience, as well as be able to, not be overwhelmed and still balance my academic life with my personal and social life. In addition, anytime I was struggling with classes, I knew that Ivy Max had the resources to help me succeed in them. For example, I definitely struggled a lot in AP Physics in my first semester, but I was able to get one-on-one tutoring with Ivy Max, and that helped me eventually secure an A at the end of the semester. And not only for physics, I was able to get help across a wide variety of classes, so the resources there were definitely a huge asset in helping me succeed academically. In addition, their guidance with extracurriculars was extremely helpful because they told me how important it was to demonstrate leadership, as well as be able to show impact in an area that I'm passionate about, which are qualities that are very important for applications to business school. So I knew that I was interested in mental health for much of my life. So with Ivy Max's help, I was able to create a club at Ivy Max centered around mental health, and actually expand the club to multiple branches at different schools. And eventually we held a few different mental health events for the public, as well as gained a lot of followers for our newsletter that we were creating. And this is something that was very cool to be able to create some kind of tangible impact, because it's something that I definitely wouldn't have been able to do myself, without Ivy Max's connection. And finally, in the application process, Ivy Max was just there to answer any questions I had, whether that was just about filling out the application itself or narrowing down the schools that I was applying to a very realistic set of reach schools and target schools and safety schools. In addition, when I was creating my personal essays, Ivy Max's essay editors were super helpful in helping me create this story out of my personal experiences as well as my extracurriculars and create it into a very cohesive representation of who I am that would speak well to the college administrators. So Ivy Max was definitely super helpful across all of my experiences, and I'm very grateful that I was able to go to my dream school.
好的，谢谢大家。好，我来分享一下哈。对，Lauren 这个孩子呢，其实她的姐姐也是我们的学生，她们姐妹俩都是我们的学生。那 Lauren 呢，她是8年级结束的时候，9年级来到飞达的。我记得那个时候，我们差不多花了1年的时间，然后帮她来寻找她最感兴趣的事情是什么啊，而且以后她要去读什么样的专业。然后呢，后来发现呢，他对飞达的这些社团都没有兴趣。那我就问他，我说那你对什么有兴趣？他说，哎，我对这个 mental health 就是青少年的这个心理健康。哎，我说这个好哈，后来我们就帮他这个在飞达成立的这个社团，这大应该是6年前的事情哈。那他10年级的时候，后来他上了大学之后呢，其实这个社团还在继续。我想今天在这个电脑前面的可能有不少的家长的孩子，也是这个 Mental Health for Youth 的社团的孩子。其实这位小姐姐就是当年最早的这个 founder 呀，所以通过 Mental Health 这个社团呢，她从那边找到了自信，找到了方向找到了理想。她其实后来申请的是沃顿，就是大家也知道是世界上很有名的商学院但是呢，它还有一个非常大的亮点，它刚刚在视频里面有说，就是它的portfolio， 就它的艺术作品集。对，他其实在这个画画方面也是很有天赋的。后来呢，我们就鼓励他说，哎，虽然你申请的不是这个艺术专业，但是呢，如果你在艺术方面能够做出来一些很有特色的、这个很有创造力的这个艺术作品集，一定能够让你 stand out。他呢就真的是做了一套非常不错的这个 art portfolio 所以到现在呢，其实飞达的老师也帮助了不少的像 Lauren 这样的孩子进入这个心中理想的名校，而且最后读的是经济和金融这一块的这个专业。所以有不少的家长就是觉得，哎，我孩子以后不学艺术，为什么还要去做这个艺术作品集？我想这边就找到了答案，对吧？好的，那我想呢，今天还有很多的时间，大家来是听这个咱们的文书的分享的。那我的分享就暂时到这个地方。
谢谢张校长。
不会。
那我们往下。好，那我们现在就来，我们开始第一个重头戏。我们今天有3大段重头戏第一段重头戏就是 common application 跟 collision application 的一个我们现在做一个分析，好不好？对。
Okay, so now let's look at a common app and collision app and the usage system, their difference, as you can see here. So let's take a look at Common App first. So it is open now, so students can apply for up to 20 colleges on Common App. On the personal statement, students need to choose one from 7 personal statements, and for the activity list, you can fill up to 10 items and 150 words per item. And for the order list, you can fill out up to 5 items, 100 characters per item. And the deadline varies by school, and we will show it to you later. And for collision app, so if you want to apply for more than 20 colleges, you can choose some colleges to apply on collision app. So you also need to fill out your basic information, as a personal statement are different. Also up to 650 words, you need to choose one from 6, but the topics will be different from Common App, and we will also show it to you later. For the activity list, you can write up to 8 items, 255 words per item, and for the honors list, up to 5 items, but you don't have to provide detailed description. The deadline is also different by schools. And the third platform most students use is UC application system. We already host a meeting to demo our UC application system in a meeting before, so you can reach out to your service teacher for the videos and the slides you want to learn more about the UC application systems. So yes, the deadline is November 30th.
谢谢米老师。对，因为那个 UC System 的话，我们2周前其实有开过相关的讲座，所以就是说，如果你想了解的话，请你去跟各大学习中心去联系哈。那么我这边可以快速的用中文就是抓一下重点，其实。我们这边大多数还是学生会做 UC System 跟 Common Application， 然后字数上来讲的话 ，Common App 的话是650个字，它是7题选1题，然后那个 UC System 的话是350个字，但是它是8篇文章要选4篇文章这样子。对，然后那个活动 Activities 来讲的话呢，就是 Common App 是可以填10个活动。但是呢，这个 UC System 的话，你要填20个活动，所以大家现在可以想一下，有没有到20个？没有的话，赶紧做，对，赶紧做。像9年级、10年级、11年级的学生还来得及。对，然后再来的话，就是说 deadline 特别注意一下，就是 UC 的这个截止日期是在11月30号这样子。好。
Okay, now I will demo what Common App looks like.
对，我们现在要来给大家 demo 一下，就是 Common Application 的申请表。对，然后我们也会用中英文的方式，跟大家呈现。
Okay, this is what Common App looks like. So first you need to create an account and then start adding your colleges. I already list some colleges here. As you can see, you can list up to 20 colleges here. So just click this button and search the colleges you want to apply for, and it will show up here, and then click add, and it will show here.
对，这边想跟大家讲一下，因为在 Ivy Max 的这个 College Application 的流程里面，我们有一个很重要的环节是会让学生跟你的 counselor 去制定 College List。好，那当然这个是一个 back and forth 的一段时间的一个环节。那最终讨论出来的这个学校呢，我们会把这个学校可能是10所，可能15所，可能20所，我们就会把它放在这个上面。好，那你可以去点选填写进去这样子。对。
Okay, so let's take a look at Brown University as an example. When you click here, it will show the school's information. So the most importantly is deadline. So it will show if the school has EA, ED, or regular decision deadline, their difference. So Brown, they don't have an EA, but they do have an ED. So the deadline is here. So remember to also check their college website for more detailed informations. And as we can see, standard test policy always required. You can check here, some school put SAT or ACT test, the required or optional. So Brown require SAT or SAT test, so you need to report your ACT or SAT test on Common App. And recommendations. So Brown requires 2 recommendation teacher's letter and other evaluation letter from your advisor or your mentor or your counselor. So it also has the documents like school reports, council recommendation, mid-year report requires. You can also find all the information here. It's really convenient for you. So then you can see the writing requirement here. So you need to submit Common App personal essays, and also Brown has 7 supplementals you need to write. You can also click here for more detailed.
好，那我这边也快速跟大家做一个总结。那 Amy 老师是假设，就是说这个 Brown University， 好，那我们点进去之后呢，我们可以清楚的看到，这个 application 的 deadlines， 就是这个截止日期。那包含就是说学生有没有要申请 EAED 的截止日期，还是说这个学校呢，它有没有，比如说像有些学校是 REA 这样子，那这个我们在上面都可以清楚的看得到。那另外来讲的话呢，我们可以往下看一下，就是这个标化考试也是可以点选进去，看看这个学校它有没有需要SAT 或 ACT 好，或者是其他的各类的这种标化考试的成绩。好，然后再来就是讲到这个师长推荐信叫 recommendation letter， 它这边有个 有一个标准，然后呢，这个我们到时候也会在中心开这个家长会的时候，还有这个填表会议的时候，跟大家讲清楚这个 recommendation letters 这一块是怎么操作的。然后因为有些学生他们申请的可能是 art 的专业啊，或者是 music 的专业，然后他们会需要提交这个 portfolio 的部分。那大家一定要特别注意这个 portfolio 的这个时间跟这个一般的这种就是 deadline 的时间可能会不一样哈，所以就是说一定要点选进去看清楚。那当然您的这个 college application manager， 因为在 Ivy Max 的这个 application 的系统里面，我们除了 counselor editor 之外，我们还会有 college application manager 来 manage 学生所有的一个申请进度跟流程嘛。那这个 manager 他也会跟着学生一起去看，然后看看就是说这个 art portfolio 或者是 music portfolio 的一个截止日期哈，大家什么时候交，然后最后把它放在这个 additional 的这个 information 上面，这样子。然后在最下方的话呢，就是它的这个 writing 的 requirement， 就是它的一个要求，好 ，right 写作的一个要求。那这也是我们待会张校长跟 Sebastian 老师会讲到的，就是除了主文书之外，每一个学校呢都会有。不是每个学校，大多数的学校都会有一个 writing supplement 哈。那像以这个 Brown 为例的话，它这上面就总共有7篇的这个 supplement 是需要写的，还是挺不少的，挺多的。对，然后怎么写，然后有一些很重要的关键，这个张校长跟 Sebastian 老师等一下都会讲到。好
Okay, thus you can check the here for college information. Then you can start working on your application form. So we can see has different sections here. So let's start from the profile first. So here basically you just need to fill all the personal informations and address, contact details, and the languages. If you have second language, you can also put it here.
对，这边的话其实就是填上学生个人的讯息，就真实的填上。
And also the family information, the parent information. If you have siblings, you can also put it here.
对，还有就是你的家庭的情况。
Okay, now let's move to the education section. So you need to choose your high school here and enter the date of entry. I want to mention that if you have taken any classes out of your high school, like for secondary high schools, you can put it here. I put an example here. If you ever taken AP classes or in FMX, you can put High Bluff Academy. The information here is your second high schools.
好，这边的话，我想要跟就是大家再解释一下，我们是不是先回到上个界面？对，这个界面上的话，它主要就是说，要填写学生现在目前就读的学校嘛。好，那这个我想应该大多数人都是没什么问题的。对，那我们 continue 下去。刚刚那个 Amy 老师她特别讲到这一块，就是说，因为Ivy Max 这边有很多的学生呢，就是会修很多的 AP 课。那为什么要修很多的 AP 课？就对大学申请很有帮助。但是很多学生呢，他们在学校因为并没有开设这么多的 AP 课，或者是说他们希望有一些 AP 课能够在稍微年级低一点的时候修，把它先修起来。所以这些 AP 课其实呢，他们是属于校外高中的 AP 课。那我们会把校外高中的 AP 课，好，这一个选项就是说。你可以把它填在这个地方，就是这个叫做 secondary high school 这个地方。那你可能呢，就是比如说在我们这边的话，你可能是 High Bluff Academy， 或者是说像 Franklin Academy， 那都是填在这一块地方，这样子。
Okay, so if you have taken any classes in colleges or universities, you can also put it here. As here we can see it has 3 different kinds. If you have taken classes, AP classes, in dual enrollment with high school, you can choose here and put your courses here. If you have taken any summer classes in university and colleges, you can put it as the summer programs. And if you take any classes with credits or were directed by colleges or community colleges, you can also report it here and put the date here.
对，这一块跟刚刚那边有点不太一样。刚刚填的是你的算是第2个高中，好，修课的高中。那么这一边的话呢，主要是填你在大学修课的。那大学修课又分成3个部分。第一个部分叫 dual enrollment， 就是说有些公立高中或私立高中，他们会跟社区大学 community college 或者是一些大学去合作，然后合作完之后一起去开学，就让学生可以去转介这个学分哈。那这个叫 dual enrollment， 你可以把你的学分，好，你在这个 这个社区大学修过的话，你可以填在这个地方。那有些呢学生他会在 summer 的时候，在 summer camp 上面去修一些学分，或不是学分，就是修一些课程，那这个叫 summer program。那另外来讲的话呢，就是说如果有学生去社区大学修学分，然后是有 credit 的，或者是说你有参加过其他大学的课程是有拿 credit 的，你可以填在这个有 credit 的这一块，这样子。
Then let's continue move to the grades. So here you can put the class size, class ranking, and also GPA and cumulative GPA. You can report either your weighted GPA or unweighted GPA here.
对，你可以选择放上 weighted 的 GPA， 就是有加上 AP 或 honor 的成绩的，这个叫 weighted 的 GPA， 或者是 unweighted 的 GPA。好，然后你可以选择，然后把你的这个最后就是12年级的这个分数先把它填在上面。那至于就是说你觉得你的成绩现在看起来到底是要用 weighted 的好还是用 unweighted 的好，这个呢当然我们主要是建议是weighted的，当然就是说如果你有存在这些问题的话，可以跟你所属的 College Application Manager 去做一个讨论，看看怎么样放，看起来会比较漂亮。对。
Then the current and most recent year course. So you can list all the courses you're taking this academic year. So if you haven't enrolled in the courses yet, and you can also list your courses you're gonna take in, like say, 12th grade. So they will be able to see what courses you're taking for 12th grade. You can also put them here.
对，这一块部分的话，其实主要填的是你12年级的选课那12年级的选课其实还是非常重要的千万不要觉得12年级以前把大多数的 AP 都选完了，12年级可以开始躺平，千万没有这回事。一般来讲，我们会建议学生在12年级的时候能够选择一些比较有挑战性的课程，比如说像 AP Research。multivariable calculus， 然后能够让大学看到你就是很 challenge yourself 这样子，对，然后对，当然就是说你只需要填上你选了什么课嘛，你这个毕竟你这个成绩也还没有出来，所以你可以让人家一目了然看到你选的这些课程是比较挑战的课程的话，其实是最好的。
Then let's look at the honors. So you can report any honors related to your academic achievements beginning from 9th grade. You can fill up to 5 honors, but if some students have more than 10, you can put it in the additional information here. So you can put the most important 5 honors here.
对，这个 Amy 老师说的很好哈，就 Common Application 的这个上面呢，它可以让你填写5个奖项，那并且你需要把你自己的奖项去做一个分类哈，比如说你是在学校得的奖，还是什么国家级的奖、地区型的奖，这个它会帮你做个分类，还有包含你的年级。那如果说呢，像是我们很像一般来讲 Ivy Max 的学生9年级就来参加我们的话，他一定是超级无敌多奖项，可能10几个。那到底要怎么放上去呢？放哪5个最重要？这个也是可以跟 Application Manager 去做一个讨论。然后对，那多出来的这些奖项的话，不是说你就不用放，你可以把它放在 Additional Information 上面，对，还是可以呈现出来的。
Okay, now look at the testing sections. So here you can choose to report your ACT or SAT and other standard tests like AP exam, AP test here. So for some schools, they do require ACT or SAT test. You have to report your scores here, but for some option, you can also choose report or not. So here, for example, we can add SAT test and AP subject test, but don't worry if you are gonna take the AP test next year, let's say next May, but you haven't taken the test here, you can also put them here so they will be able to say it, you're gonna take this AP test next year. So here you can put the scores here for SAT test, and for AP test, you can choose to report what AP test you want to report here. And the scores here too.
对，标化考试叫 standard test 也是在这个大学申请很重要的一环。那这边的位置就是要让我们去填写你考过的 ACT 的成绩，或者是 ACT， 或者说甚至可能有些国际学生他是需要有一个托福成绩来印证自己的英文能力、英文水平是很好的。对，所以就是填在这个位置，包含你的分数。那至于 AP 的话，刚刚那个 Amy 老师讲的很大的重点，好，就是说如果你还没有开始考 这个你还没有考到这个 AP， 但是你准备要考，比如说12年级的学生明年5月份要考这个 AP 的话，你也可以先把它放上来，这样子。
Okay, now look at activities here. So as you can see, you have different kinds, and you can list the activities in order of their importance here. So first you need to put the most important activities here, so they will see immediately. So here you can fill out up to 10 activities here. So we suggest students to fill up to 10 as much as possible.
尽量把它填满。对，10个都填不满的话，你的 UC 申请表20个你可能更难填满了。对，就是尽量填满。那怎么填呢？不是按照顺序，按照重要，就是哪一个东西对你来讲是最重要的，然后往下这样子填，好不好？那什么样是重要，怎么样是不重要，这个我们也是很有技巧性的，这个我们也可以到时候跟我们的顾问老师或者是application manager 去做一个讨论，因为这个每个学生的情况就真的完全都不一样了。
Okay, the last one, the writing section. So here you can see the personal statement here. So you will able to choose 1 out of 7 prompts. So up to 650 words, and you can write your answers here.
对，这就是我们刚刚提到的，就是7篇文章选1篇，好，然后1篇是650个字这样子。这个就是主文书，对，主文书的部分。
Yeah, so this is basically what Common App looks like, but in the future, we're gonna have in-person workshop to provide more detailed guidance and answer your questions regarding fill out the form.
对 ，again 就是我们今天就是 generally 的讲一下，因为填这个申请表是大学申请的一大学问哦，不只是这个 essay 而已，所以就是说我们会有很多的 details， 我们会开在各大学习中心的这个讲座上面、家长会上面，还有就是指导学生填申请表上面。这个的话呢，就是我们会再另外通知学生跟家长。
Okay, now let's welcome Principal Zhang to tell us the Common App personal statements and also Coalition personal statements.
欢迎张校长。
All right. Thank you, Amy. Thank you, Isabel. Before I talk about Common App personal statement and Coalition personal statement, I would like to point out a few myths about those essays. Because I work with students and parents over the past 2 decades, about 20 years at IBMax. Year after year, I have parents and students asking me, about how to write Common App essays. And then for some reason, they think, I have to write about what I want to study in college in my personal statement. And my answer is always, no. I mean, you don't have to write about your intended field of study or intended major, blah blah blah. Because most of the major specific questions will be reflected in the supplement essays, which will be covered by Mr. Sebastian, a little bit later. So I wouldn't waste my time on that. So that's one myth I wanted to point it out. Another myth is they think more about the writing style, the word of choice, expressions more than the substance of the essays. So when we write college essays, especially personal statement, this is probably one of the most important essays in the whole application. So you really have to think about what is your defining experience? What makes you different? What makes you stand out? I always tell my students, if you finish writing a personal statement, and then somehow it can also be applied to your neighbor's kid, I would say throw it in the garbage, right, Sebastian? Yes. So it's not customized. Yeah, it's not customized. So the best essay is the most fitting one. But you really have to think about what makes you unique, what makes you stand out among your peers. So that's some important advice I would like to give to the students. Okay, so now personal statement. When you look at the prompts here, there's probably one topic that's directly related to, what you want to study or your intellectual pursuit. Almost the rest of the essay topic was about your identity, your background, and your character, resilience, grit, critical thinking, risk-taking, self-reflection, personal growth. So that's exactly what the colleagues wanted to see. Okay, not exactly a nerd, who only cares about academic work, but has very little contribution or involvement in the community, and so on and so forth. So, well, I have different approach when I advise my students write essays. I would always want students to start from writing the supplement essays first. Why? Because the supplement essays also are critical because the colleges would like to judge whether or not you're a good fit for the school by reading your supplement essays. So you will have to carefully strategize what material should go into supplement essays and what needs to go into your Common App personal statement. And I oftentimes advise my students to choose the last topic. In other words, open topic, because I want my students to really focus on what makes them unique, what makes them special. And that experience may not fit in any one of the boxes here. Then create your own box, which will be number 7. All right? OK, 好，我简单用中文讲一下好了，好不好？伊莎贝尔老师，我需要用中文讲一遍吗？简单讲一下 highlight，
对，
好不好？
简单讲一下。
OK， 好，对，其实家长和孩子的迷思哈，有那么几项，我刚刚在前面有讲。第一个就是说，很多孩子问我说，那我的这个 Common App 的主文书是不是一定要跟我未来要读的专业有关系？我总是说 no，doesn't have to，OK， 而且最好不要有关系。为什么？大家看一下哈，这7个作文题目，其实真正跟学术有关的可能只有1道题。那其他的题目跟什么有关呢？孩子的这个性格、个性、背景，对吧？还有他的抗压能力，他的批判性的思维，这个冒险的精神和这个自我的成长和这个内省，对吧？这些东西是这些一流名校需要看的。那我有时候会指导我们的孩子，就说他可以先把重点放在那些小文书上面，因为这些小文书，各个大学的这些小文书非常的关键，非常重要。对，因为这些大学就通过看你的小文书来判断你是不是个 good fit，OK， 你是不是个 good match for the school， 你是不是最适合的。大家听着我这个话叫最适合，并不是说 the best candidate， but the most fitting candidate for the school。对吧？好，那小文书的题目应该怎么去写，怎么去选材 ，versus 你的 Common App 的主文书的题目用什么内容，对吧？所以的话呢，这2个是要跟咱们的文书老师去好好的做分析和比较的，千万不要有这个 overlap， 叫什么叫 overlap， 就是重复呀，因为大学给了你这么多的机会来让你展示自己，你最好不要给重复的信息，对吧？而且呢。还要提供非常独特的，就像前面刚刚我们的那个学生 Lauren 黄所说的，对吧？他说整个的他高中4年的经历和到最后跟飞达的 editor 一起 work 在一起，能够很全面的展现他，好吧？行，我会没了的讲，就这样 I stop here. Next one. OK， yeah.这个 Correlation 呢，这个平台呢是2016年，2016年以哈佛大学为首，他们创办了一个新的这个申请平台。那到现在也差不多快没有10年，8年了哈，对。但是呢，它其实上是跟 Common App compete 的一个申请平台哈。那但是到现在呢，好像也没有真的做到它发展的那么好。 当时呢，大家知道现在这个整个美国的政治是严重的左倾，其实就是要帮助弱势群体，对吧？实际上就是打压亚裔的，对。所以它这个 Coalition 的这个平台起来呢，实际上就是完全是给这些低收入的孩子，来做了这个。So, I actually wouldn't recommend students to use the Coalition application. So I would highly recommend students to use the Com app, the Com application. And in terms of essays, I think they're more or less very similar. You probably could recycle somewhat from your Common App personal statement to Coalition personal statement. When you actually look closely to the 6 topics, you will also find that there's probably one topic that's directly related to your academic pursuit, similar to the Common App personal statement. The rest of the topics that, still related to your personal experience, and you are your maturity, and how do you deal with challenges? Are you reflective, and do you have the guts to challenge authority, and so on and so forth. Yeah, just very similar to the Common application. Okay, next one. All right, so I would like to give the floor to my colleague, Mr. Sebastian. The floor is yours.
Thank you so much. I actually want to start by bringing everyone back to the video that we saw of the student from Wharton who just graduated. And that student wasn't one of my students, but there was something that she said in her video that made me very happy to hear her say. She talked about how we had helped her with her story. And that's overall the point I want to make today, is that I want everyone to make sure that they understand that what we're doing is we're telling stories. That's what the supplemental essays are about, also the personal statement. They are not lists of information or things that we did. They are stories about who you are as a person. And within those stories, obviously, there's like some functional purposes that we want to serve of, conveying the rigor of your classes and the depth of the community impact that you've had. Of course we do. But ultimately, every essay you write comes back to being a story about who you are, what you learned, how you changed, how you grew, how this affects the person you want to become in the future. That's what we're doing. Okay. So when it comes to the supplemental essays, they're around probably like 24 different prompts. A lot of them are like very like specialized and only show up in 1 or 2 schools. But in general, these are the most frequent prompts that we have, the ones that we see on the screen. And I'm going to just do a quick kind of run through of the way that you can think about these different prompts. And ultimately, there's a separate point that I want to make, but we'll start with the why us. So roughly around half of the schools use the why us. And the why us is typically the one essay that is the most like agonizing and grueling. It takes the most time. It's the most number of drafts. And that's largely because it takes so much research into specific schools in order to like find those core important details that are things about that university that really like resonate with who you are as a person. I tell my students that when we start meeting in the summer, that just get into your head, you're going to do 100 hours of college research, depending on how many schools you do, or almost 100, maybe 80. And that is because of these why us essays. They are typically short, which makes it harder. And you have to find things about the culture of the school, the like specific unique characteristics of the department that your major is going to be in, aspects of the curriculum. So, like every school, they spend millions of dollars planning out the different curriculum for all of their different majors and making them unique and better than other schools, or so they think. And so you have to identify aspects of that curriculum. Like you can start research when you're a freshman, or there's an internship sophomore year, or there's a certain like writing seminar that is required for the gen ed stuff and how that fits into what you're doing in your other parts of the university. There's so many like unique and different like distinct details and characteristics that you have to understand about the school. And there's so many different ways to go about getting that information. And ultimately the YS essay is it's the hardest essay to do. It's also the easiest one to like cut corners and think that you've done a good job. So for those of you who have started writing your YS essays, one thing that ask yourself as you look from one sentence to the next, if you can just copy paste a different name of a professor or a different name of the school, and the sentence still works for any other school, it's a bad sentence, it's a bad essay. And so the YS really does take a lot of time. And then we have the Y major. That is also roughly around half the schools, something like that. It gets complicated because many schools combine the YS and the Y major together. And we'll look at later, we'll look at USC, which is one example, that they have a 250-word essay when you have to say why you're interested in your major and what your plan is for pursuing that major at USC specifically. And you only get 250 words. So the Y major is typically, it's kind of like a repackaged version of your UC6 essay, or maybe your UC4, depending on how you approach that. But it still requires numerous drafts, and it's very distinct from different schools to different schools. And let's not forget that most of you, almost all of you, are going to choose different majors for different schools. And so now you have that creates the need of having versions of the Y major that are different lengths, different topics that fit different schools, fit different prompts. And all that means is that you need lots of different stories, and they all have to be about you. The next set that we have is the role impact essays. And some schools will ask about like the impact or the role in your community that you've already had. Some schools will ask like a focus on what you think your impact will be once you get to their school. Other schools will ask both together at the same time. And actually, I did skip the third one, the identity diversity prompt. That one is, at least from like what I've been observing, that one's one of the more, it's becoming more common in the last couple of years. For obvious reasons, we've had a very significant change in the topics of the prompts over the last couple of years because of ChatGPT and some other stuff that's happening politically in the country. And there are more and more of these, the identity, diversity, personal challenge kind of prompts, because the schools want to know about like how you define who you are, and they want to know about like certain experiences you've had in like dealing with people who might disagree with you about certain things that come from the world that you have grown up in. And then the last couple bullets is less common. I'd say probably around 10% of the schools do the last two, but it's enough that it's a, you're likely to have that prompt at least once or twice in your schools. The meaningful extracurricular can be a lot of different things. So for example, it could be a repurposed and repackaged version of your community impact essay. Or for some of you, it's going to be the essay where you showcase your artistic talent or your musical talent or that sport that you play, right? So again, it's very different for different schools and for each of us as we're individually trying to figure out the best way to showcase what we do. And then lastly, the something that brings you joy. That one shows up in different forms, but really what we're talking about is they're prompts that are trying to get at like who you are as a person outside of school, outside of your extracurriculars, just being a kid, a teenager, that should be part of the essays that you're writing, the show that you're, actually are like a normal, actual person. Next slide. So I've shown up here is just for like reference. So as you're imagining like how to tell a story, 250 words on the left and 150 words on the right. And it's a very small amount of space. And we'll see examples later of 100 words, 50 words, and even smaller. And the thing that I want everyone to make sure that you remember is that the smaller the prompt, like the fewer words that you're allowed to use, the more difficult it is to tell your story in a interesting, compelling, and personal way. So I have a lot of students that when they see those short prompts and they say, oh, okay, cool, it doesn't matter. You know, I can just like throw something together. And that's the opposite of what you want to do. The shorter the word limit, the more difficult it is, the more drafts it takes, the more demanding you have to be of yourself in figuring out how to tell that story. Next slide. So promoting your brand. The overall process of what we're doing for applying to colleges, like ultimately, if you take like a 10,000 foot view of what you were doing, it's really just one big advertising campaign. And you are the product. And we are selling the product. That's you. We're trying to convince the universities to buy that product. And the way to do that is to think about the advertisements that you see on social media, TV, whatever. There are so many different ways that companies use to promote and sell their products. And we have that expertise of figuring out, like the right ways for you and giving you advice about that. But at the end of the day, it does come down to you deciding first, what is my brand? And secondly, what is the right way to promote my brand the best that we can? Because we've seen that there's very different prompts, very different mix of prompts. Different schools have different numbers of prompts. And so one school at a time, you have to make this calculation of which prompts are available. How many essays is this school going to see? How does all of this fit into my personal statement? How does all of the essays together, even a step further back, fit into the activities list and what they see on the transcript, right? And then eventually, a certain number of schools, you're going to have interviews. And so it's all a very complicated, interwoven process that still comes down to you, who you are, and how we promote you to the best possible way. Next slide. So three ways to approach it. First is strategic. And when I say strategic, I'm talking about the planning and the coordinating. So that slide that we had of the prompts, what I hope that you got from that is the complexity of it. That certain schools have certain prompts, other schools don't have those prompts. Some schools have one prompt, some schools have 5 or 6, and some of them are short and some of them are long. It's a very, very complex mix. And then you have your personal statement. And this is all requiring you individually, and then in partnership with your editor and partnership with your counselors, plus your school counselors, plus your parents, plus all these people who are like having input on the right way to promote your brand. And it's very complicated. And the strategic thinking, it's absolutely necessary. If you go into it and you're just kind of throwing up stories over here and over there, and you don't have any sort of conscious like process or reason for why you're making these choices, then you're not going to have a conscious or planned reason for the results that you get from the schools, right? So if you want to have the most control possible over the results that you get, then that means you have to exert the most control over the decisions about which essays, which stories, which prompts, which schools. Okay. The personal statement, it's your base. It's the foundation, right? And depending on what kind of story you tell for the personal statement, the supplemental essays are layers on top of that foundation. Or if we want to stick with the advertising metaphor, the personal statement is your main outfit, and the supplemental essays are accessories and jewelry that highlights the personal statement, that matches with it, but also adds something distinct on their own, right? All of these essays have to be seen together as a whole, but also can stand alone by themselves and tell us something interesting and compelling about who you are. The next one, organic. So when I say organic, what I mean is stories that are natural, stories that are personal. So one of the most frequent pitfalls that I see when we have the first 2 or 3 meetings with my students is the attempt to try to like showcase, show off, brag. Oh, look at my very, very fancy vocabulary and look at how professional I am. And that was a more successful strategy maybe 5 years ago, before ChatGPT and before the abundance of professional essay helpers. But now that is not as essential a strategy. Yes, we want to have vocabulary and a level of writing that matches who you are as a person, that shows off how smart you are and how good of a writer you are. Absolutely. Of course we do. Right. But ultimately, what we want are stories that feel like conversations. It should be that the admissions officer, when they sit down and they read their story, they can feel who you are. It should be natural. So as you're doing your writing, as you're making the choices about what things to write about, think about it as like the way it feels as the words come out of you and the ideas come out of you. Does it feel organic and natural? Does it feel like we are getting to know who you are? Okay. It's a conversation. It should be personal. And then the last one, dynamic. This one's been actually kind of like my special emphasis this year, is dynamic in terms of like the opposite of static. So another one of the big pitfalls that I see in the first drafts of the essays is that the student has written a story about, for example, P2P, right? They went to Hunan, they helped some farmers, they learned a lot of things about business and economics and had a good time. They made some friends, maybe they had some leadership experiences, that sort of stuff. And that's all great. And then they write an essay where all of it is contained in the past. It's static. It's a story about who they were a year ago or 2 years ago. And those stories, they aren't bad, but they do not help you as much as dynamic stories. We want stories that are active. We want stories that are happening now, that are giving us new insights. So one of the first things I tell all my students is that your essays, the process of writing them and thinking about them and making these choices about what memories and details go into the story, what we want is that the process of writing the story and editing it and editing it and editing it, that is a form of discovery. You are learning new things by writing this story. We want it to be dynamic and active and happening now. Looking back on something in the past, there will be parts of the story that are in past tense, of course, but we want to know who you are now and how that experience that you had before, however long it was, how has that experience shaped who you are now and ultimately who you're going to become. And so this dynamic process can be very intimidating because most students have this sort of compulsion to think that they have to have the answers to everything. You don't have to answer all of the questions as you're digging into who you are as a person. I actually prefer for the essays to have an element of you're still searching, right? We make some progress, we learn some things, but once the essay ends, you're still learning. And the reason I like for this discovery to be like ongoing is that 2 reasons. First, on a very like sort of technical and subconscious way, it forces the admission officer to continue to think about you when they're done with the essay. It's one of the most important things that you can do with these essays, to force them to think about you after they're done. And so if this journey that you're on of self-discovery through this essay, if it's still happening, if there's still questions that you have to answer and things that need to be done in the future, then either consciously or subconsciously, that admissions officer, they're going to think about you later. And that's a win. That's a big win. And then the other reason I like having the ongoing story is because it implies, very directly implies that these like nagging questions or these unresolved questions that you have, college is where you'll solve them. And so just inherently, you've now made college necessary, right? It is a crucial and unavoidable part of your story that you're on this journey and it has to go to college X. And so whether the admissions officers even notice it or not, it's still a useful and positive strategy that is going to add to the overall like package that we're creating, these advertisements that we're making for you as the product. So next slide, please. So now we're going to jump into some examples. So Carnegie Mellon, I chose, it's a very popular school, a very high percentage of the ED applications are to Carnegie Mellon, especially those of you who are into like CS and engineering type stuff. So it's a popular school. I'm pretty sure it's over the years has become my favorite school for various reasons. But for tonight, the reason I chose it is that the prompts are fairly standard. 300 words is a little bit longer than most, but these three topics are pretty typical and straightforward. And so as we see here, the first prompt we have is a why major, right? And there's a couple ways that you can approach the why major. When you're asking something why, anytime you're asking why, one answer for why is things in the past, right? All the stuff that happened before that have led to now. But another reason for why, another explanation of why, is the things that you want to do in the future. That's also an answer of why. And so that's a choice that you're making. This is a decision and a conversation you should have with your editor and your counselors, and the right way to approach a prompt like this, the why major. The second one is not too many schools have this prompt, but I do like it because it forces the students to think about, the whole reason that you're doing college in the first place, right? So we all take it for granted, like, oh yeah, of course we're going to go to college. Of course we are. And then we're going to go to grad school and make a whole bunch of money and live happily ever after. But if you don't ever have like critical thought of what is the like key components of the whole journey that you're going on in the next 4 years or 6 or 8 years, then you're not really showing off like the amount of like critical thinking you can do and the way that you can be insightful and sensitive to your own purpose and finding reasons to move forward in the direction that you want to go. And so I actually do like the CMU2 prompt because even though most other schools don't use it, it is the way that you should think about all of the schools you're applying to. It's the way you should think about the whole process of applying to college and the whole point of why you're even going. And then the third prompt actually is, I think they changed it 2 years ago. So it's relatively new. And this is kind of like the wild card, that personal thing. And, the slide that I was showing about all the different prompts, and it has many ways that you can approach it. So maybe you want to do one of your community impact things. You're president of a club and you cleaned up a bunch of beaches or whatever it was. That could be a valid thing. Or it could be music, sports, art, plus all the certain like specific personal things. There's so many ways to approach the prompts that you see for CMU3. And that comes back to this conversation that you have with your editors and counselors to make those right choices. Next slide. Columbia University, also a popular ED. And it's a brutal application because if you look at the word counts, 150 words. It is so hard to say something big and important in 150 words. And, when you're doing a school like Columbia, you'll have written several essays already, especially like, for example, the UC essays. Almost everyone's going to do the UC. You have those 350 word essays, and you had to cut a lot of things just to get down to 350. And then now think about how hard it'll be to take those 350 and squeeze it down to 150. 150 words and still say something important, still something unique, something special about who you are. It is a brutal application. But the good thing is that they give you several prompts. And so you have 5 different avenues for how to showcase the specialness of you. As far as like specifically ones that I want to talk about for Columbia. Yeah, as you can see, so number 4 is the why us. Number 5 is the why major. So they do separate those. They give you some space. The thing about the Columbia application is that, if you follow the news, Columbia has a certain culture for the most part. I mean, it's not unanimous, of course, but they lean in a certain direction politically and culturally. And when applying to Columbia, you have to find ways to fit into that. And I don't mean that you have to misrepresent yourself. And I don't mean that you have to just automatically follow what you perceive to be their culture, but you do have to be aware of the school culture and find reasons that the stories you tell make you someone who is useful and interesting and compelling within that culture. Okay, so it doesn't mean you have to follow everything that they say, but it does mean that you have to be conscious of it and explain yourself in a way that makes them find you useful for being on their campus for the next 4 years. Schools are making an investment when they choose you, and they're hoping that it works out, because you're going to be influencing dozens and dozens and dozens of other students. You're going to be taking up these spots in these research programs and symposia and all the things that you're going to do when you're in college. And they want you to succeed, and they want to know that you're going to be someone that is influencing everyone around you in a positive and productive way. And so that comes back to the research that you're doing for each school of how to figure out like the specific parts of the school culture, especially at a school like Columbia. How do you fit into that? How are you an interesting contrast to it, maybe? Strategy. Next slide. So NYU, here I have a little bit of sort of the history of NYU. And I chose NYU because, like I mentioned earlier, there's been a lot of change in the prompts that schools are using. And the reasons for that we've talked about. So 2 years ago, NYU had the prompt that you see here. And then last year, in the whole crazy wave of the post ChatGPT like transition, they tried something really kind of off the wall. And lo and behold, this year, they switched back to a prompt that is very similar to the first one. So I'll explain these here. Basically for last year, what they did was they wanted you to choose a quote. And they had, the quotes that they presented, and they all had sort of a little unique aspect to it. Is giving you a chance to forcing you not to just copy paste and look at essays that people had written before, but also to, ultimately to showcase who you are and what you're doing. 250 words. And so if you can go to the next slide. Oh, sorry. Wait, I did leave it out. Can you go back up? Oh, there it is. Okay. So this year, NYU, they this sort of the theme, the motif that they've chosen is the building bridges thing. So your community impact, your community role kind of essay, but some twists. And the first 3 that you see here, they're all pretty much the same. They're very similar. They have a little bit of a tweak among them, but the last one is different, right? The first 3 are the past up until now. And then the last one is in the future as an NYU student, the bridges you're going to build. And, bridges is just a metaphor for connection. And so you think about the stories that you have that showcase the way that you've connected with people, impacted people, and, kept that connection open in a productive way. And so then you have that choice of, is my story more about things that I've done in the past that prove the bridges I can build? Or are you better off talking strictly about the future bridges? It's all about the strategy. Next slide. So whereas NYU is just one essay, one 250-word essay, and the hard part is like figuring out, you have your personal statement, and so then you only have 250 more words to say something that is going to be good enough to get you into NYU. It's a relief that you don't have a lot of prompts, a lot of essays to write for NYU, but it's an added layer of burden and pressure to try to figure out one 250-word essay that does everything that you need to do. The opposite side of the extreme is a school like USC. And so USC has stayed constant in amid this, the flux of the essay prompts. And it's a lot of content that you have to come up with. So the first essay that you have to do is a why major at USC. So it's a YS plus a why major put together, and you only have 250 words. And if you want to do 2 majors, they want you to talk about both majors. So do the math, right? That's a very small number of words to cover a lot of material and a lot of ideas. And then you have these little short answers. And each of these are 100 characters. So not words, but 100 characters. And inevitably, almost every student I have, when we get to the USC application, they say, oh, well, does this matter? Is this important? And I hope everyone remembers what I'm about to say. If they're asking the question, they care about the answer. They have a whole fleet of admissions officers. They wouldn't be paying them all the money that they're spending if for questions that they don't care the answer to. And so for these USC shorts, they are not throwaway questions, right? This is where you start to showcase your personality. All of them together. You sit down and you think about, okay, well, some of these I want to be, showing off my like academic prowess. Some of them I want to show just my pure like personality at home, hanging out with friends or, with my family. Some of them are showing, like a community purpose and, the things that you're passionate about in terms of, like what the world is going to become and your role and what that world is going to become. And we have this mix. So I usually tell my students that I want to see 2 different examples for all of them, so that we can then like sit down and pick out the best ones, because maybe you did the class topic and it's really good, probably, your major usually. But then you have 4 other ones that are also academic and major, and that's too much. And so then we have to like, do sort of like a triage almost of placing the best 100 character little mini sentence stories together, so that we like add up into this like presentation of your brand. So next slide. And so then the individual colleges at USC, next slide, sorry. So Dornsife is the arts and sciences, the regular college, and they have a prompt that it's another 250 word prompt asking you what you care about. It's basically, what is your TED Talk, if you want to think of it that way. So it's something that you're passionate about. They already have the essay about why major and the things at USC that you're going to use to bring your academic journey to its best conclusion. So for the Dornsife essay, it is typically something like your UC7, your community impact, but it has a very different perspective on it, right? So it might be the same topic of, homelessness or Alzheimer's research, or, lots of different topics that you write about for your community impact essays, but it has a completely different perspective on it. And emphasis, again, being on showcasing your personality, your passions, like who you are, distinct from the huge, huge horde of other students who are applying to USC. And then for the engineering kids, you're going to be applying to Viterbi, and they have 2 different prompts. So you don't do the TED Talk essay, you don't do the Dornsife one, but you do these 2, also 250 word essays for the Viterbi School of Engineering. And notice that the first one is again asking, it's kind of like a why us, but through the lens of you imagining the specific contributions that you're going to make to that School of Engineering. So you have to spend 3, 4, 5, 6 hours of research into Viterbi to look at the kinds of opportunities they offer, the culture of the school, just the overall trajectory from start to finish that you're hypothetically would be on, so that you can determine a couple, 3, 4 sort of like junctures or landmarks of the kinds of contributions you would make when you're there. And then the last one is the 14 grand challenges. So this is the engineering prompt that is asking you to show that you understand like real world applications for all this advanced knowledge that you've acquired. The 14 challenges cover a pretty wide range of like sustainability, like economic stability and those kinds of things. And for the most part, you're very likely to have, like 2 or 3 of those grand challenges that do fit something from, your classes that you've taken, the summer internships that you had, the research projects that you've done. So there's a pretty good chance that out of those 14, you have at least 1 or 2 topics that do connect directly with something personal that you do. But remember, this prompt is not a story about what you did in that FRIP project last summer. You're still like projecting out into the future. So that research project, yeah, that can be the foundation, like the core or the beginning of the essay, but we're moving forward in time and you are thinking much bigger, right? It's a different story. Next slide. Now we have Brown. So Brown is one of the schools that did change pretty significantly once the last couple of years. So these prompts are what they had last year. And before that, they only had the first 3. And then 2 years before that, the third one was different, but I won't get into that. The first Brown essay, the open curriculum, it's the most distinctive element of Brown, probably the best element of Brown. And on one level, it's very obvious that, essentially you can kind of take any class you want, but it is more complicated than that. And so in order to do a good job of this Brown 1 essay, you have to have a very clear and thorough understanding of how the open curriculum works and how you would use it. Similar in a way to the first USC essay. For the second one, this is the falling into the category of, tell us about the world you come from and how that shaped who you are, right? So the role in your community that you've played, right? But then it extends it into the impact you will have once you get to Brown. So it's past and future. And you have maximum of 250 words. And then the third prompt is the sort of, that wild card personality thing, something that you find joy in. And, you're going to have a lot of temptation to talk about some academic class or, playing music or making your art. And those are valid topics. They are. But they will require having a very distinctive and unique and interesting perspective on it. Because a couple thousand kids are going to write about playing piano or violin or painting. And you have to figure out, how is your story about piano, violin, or painting? How is your story better, different, unique, special? And then you have 250 words to do it. And then, so the last 4 prompts, those are the new ones and for last year. And, similar to the USC, they do give you more room. So 100 words. And that doesn't mean you have to go all the way up to 100 words, but it does mean that you have to be very specific and clear and thoughtful. This is just a matter of time. This is multiple drafts and drafts and drafts and talking with your editor, making things shine, making sure that we are presenting most, like the largest amount and the most like clear and specific amount of who you are. And then the last one is just cruel, 50 words, why Brown? It's pretty brutal. I've had a couple interesting ones last year. 1 sentence is very short. So my advice for the why Brown at 50 words is that, being like pragmatic on it isn't going to be the right way. It's not a literal question, right? So, to say something interesting and compelling in 50 words requires you to think in ways that you've never thought before and, to get abstract and to go in, kind of creative and maybe even wild directions, to say something that when they're done looking at your Brown application and they have those 50 words and they can sit back and they say, okay, this kid is someone that we want to be at our school for the next 4 years. We want to buy this product. And I think, is that the last one? Or do I have one more? Next slide. Yeah, okay. So that's it. That's all I wanted to say. I could say a lot more, but.
Thank you, Sebastian.
Thank you.
Okay, let's move on to the next one, winning strategies. So let's welcome Principal Zhang.
Thank you, Amy. Thank you, Sebastian. I totally agree with you. Echoing your comments on Lauren Huang's sharing video. And it's actually college application. It's all about telling stories. So students need to learn to be a good storyteller. That's the reason why we see sometimes, students with straight A's in school, ace all the AP English, AP language class, AP literature courses, but just couldn't write a good story about themselves, right, Sebastian? Yeah, that's why we're here. Yeah. So you want your students to have, to have their stories well told, and I could also share a interesting anecdotes from one of my previous students who got into Stanford. He actually got a personalized letter from the admission director saying exactly the same thing that Sebastian was indicating. And in the personal note, the admission director said he was just so impressed by, his passion for pursuing economics and the journey. And then the admission officer basically just said he will be excited to, to have the student to continue this journey at Stanford. And so it's just like you said, it's a dynamic process. It's not static. And that's the reason why Ivy Max, we have for the past 20 years, we have been not just help students, to finish craft the essays at the last minute, right? But during the whole overall college planning process, we are preparing the students, right, to have unique life experiences and to develop leadership, tenacity, resilience, grit, and so on and so forth. So next slide, please. Oh, okay. All right. I believe we shared this slide last CAP season, but I would like to re-emphasize the importance. I believe that there's some parents who have students who are not yet in this, the stage of college application. So I would like to also offer something for them to walk away with. So how do you make decisions, right? Decisions will define who you are in the future. So there are some critical decisions you have to make. Number one, explore your passion with purpose. Right, that's the reason why Stanford in its mission 2025 clearly stated, declare your mission, not your major. So what Stanford is expecting is not for students just to write about what major you want to study, but also they want students who have been pursuing that major with a passion, with a purpose, or with a mission, right? And then the second important decision is to learn how to prioritize. So when it comes to EA extracurricular activities, quality is always more important than quantity. All right, so that's very important. I can also piggyback on Lauren Huang's experience throughout, her high school. And she's an artist. She runs online businesses. She has an internship at the city, and she does many other different things. But there's a very distinctive involvement in her extracurricular activities. Is actually her mental health for youth. That will become the theme of her, throughout her whole high school career. And third decision involves developing a passion project. I think the best project is the one that you can combine both your passion as well as your academic interest. That's the reason why we developed global philanthropy leadership programs that we bring students to, to China, to the rural areas, to experiment with sustainable environment engineering, public health, and P2P microfinance, so on and so forth. At the same time, we also take students to Nepal to explore human rights, and to Kenya and Arizona, Costa Rica, to learn about biodiversity. So in those programs, students not only do humanitarian or philanthropy work, but they also be able to explore or develop their intellectual pursuit or academic interest through those projects. And our counselors will be very happy to help students to design project, even side project, while the students are there doing, the field work. And the fourth most important decision high students will have to make is to challenge yourself. You will find out a lot of the essay prompts has to do with, have you ever challenged yourself, or have you ever challenged a belief or idea? And so they just don't want students who always, maintain the status quo, who stay within the comfort zone. They want students who constantly challenge themselves and go beyond their comfort zone. I still remember the famous quote by Amy Gutmann, who was the president of the University of Pennsylvania. I remember at one of the reception, she delivered a speech, and there's a very famous closing remark that she made, which was, find your comfort zone and go beyond it, right? So if this is something that college president expect from its incoming freshmen, so if you could demonstrate your experience in high school, that you have always been challenging yourself and go beyond the comfort zone, I'm sure you have a lot of stories to write about. So just remember, always learn to challenge yourself in the classroom and outside of your classroom. And last but not the least, maximize your summers. I would add winters and spring breaks as well, right, Isabel? Amy? Yeah. So because so much to do, you cannot just rely on doing everything, pack everything in the summer. You really have to also take advantage of the winter breaks, your spring breaks. The Stanford students who received the personalized note from the Stanford College admission director did precisely, the same thing. He actually spent the summers on doing research internships, and then all the winters in high school, he went on philanthropy trips to help the underprivileged people, in the rural areas. So how to learn how to maximize your summers and winters and spring breaks is critical. All right. Okay. So I think my colleagues, Amy and Isabel, are going to talk about, how we help students to develop overall and then in-depth, but also unique experiences throughout high school. So they have compelling and interesting, unique stories to write about in college application. Okay, back to you, Amy, Isabel.
非常非常谢谢张校长。对，刚刚张校长讲到这个5大重点，那我们怎么样可以往下进行，然后怎么样可以就是趁现在还有时间的话，可以 build up 一下我们自己。那我们现在往下看。对，首先呢，我想跟大家介绍一下，就是因为我刚刚跟 Amy 老师在刚开始的时候也介绍了这个大学申请的这个 Common Application 的这个 Application Form 怎么填啊。那大家也其实可以看到说，在那个 Honors Awards 的栏位上面，其实是有一些5个格子需要填的。那当然，我相信就是 IVMS 的学生是挺多这个奖项可以拿的。那我想跟大家讲一下，就是说这个。像在今年暑假跟这好几年前的这个暑假开始呢，我们一直在跟这个 Franklin Education Foundation 合作，然后主要的话呢，就是我们会利用暑假6周的时间，让我们的学生有机会可以跟到这个各个不同大学领域的这个各个不同的 mentor 或教授，然后一起去完成这个他们自己喜欢领域上面的这个 research paper。那这个是相当重要的，因为学生经过6周的训练，然后6周的去写这个 research paper 的话呢，他们是有机会可以在比如说暑假期间做的话，有机会可以在9月的时候来参加这个评比。然后当然评比里面就是我们在这个平台上面也会有可能可以拿到 finalist 或者是 semi-finalist 的一些大奖，然后我们也可以把它放在我们的大学申请表里面，然后同时呢，你的写的好的作品也可以就是被 publish。 对，所以就是基本上来讲的话，你做一件事情可以得到很多好处嘛。所以就是如果说，这个当然不一定局限在 STEM 上面，可能 humanity 上面啊，或 business 上面，只要感兴趣的同学，其实都是可以参加的。但是我们这个是有一点条件限制的，就是说我们是需要靠申请，好，所以就是说，如果感兴趣的同学可以去联系你的学习中心的这个，不管是这个 CPP 的 College Planning 的 Manager，或者是说你可能现在还不是 Ivy Max 学生，但是你感兴趣想要申请的话，可以打电话到你邻近的学习中心去了解一下。这个实际的一个申请的情况，然后呢，我们会进行一个评选，评选完之后，你有资格的话，就可以跟我们的这个合作的这些大学的老师，然后开始来完成你的 research paper。我们现在秋季也开始开放时间，会是在10月11号到3月13号，然后我们对第1名的同学可以得到1万块的奖学金，那其他名次的同学也都陆陆续续会有奖学金的提供。好，然后刚刚其实张校长他也特别提到了哦，就是尽可能可以的话，就是 challenge yourself in the classroom。所以就是说，我们都知道说这个 AP 课一直都是高中期间就是比较难读，而且也是比较有挑战的这样子的一个课程。对，那有些公立高中的话呢，他们可能没有办法在比学年比较低的时候，比如说9年级或10年级的时候开放比较大量的 AP。那当然就是说，如果学生程度够，然后呢自己也觉得说可以提前开始多学习一点 AP 课，然后等一下填大学申请表的时候，我们也可以把这些所有的这个选修的 AP 可以把它写上去。所以就是说，如果有这样子的想法或兴趣的话，也可以在就是这个 Ivy Max 跟我们的 partner Franklin Academy 合作的平台上面来选择更多的这个 AP 课的选项。好，那至于怎么选，还有一个怎么样的选法也可以跟这个各大学习中心去联系。我们这个 AP 课呢是提供 credit 的，就是有学分的。那最后你这个最终的成绩，我们是可以把它放在大学申请的这个，就是说可以把它算到这个大学申请的weighted的成绩上面的。那这个怎么算呢？我们也是在最后大学申请表上的时候，我们会指导学生。那么现在呢，就是秋季开始，我们已经有就是最新的一轮的 AP 学分课。那大家可以看一下，它是有2个 semester， 一个是9月14到12月21号，这是第1个学期；第2个学期会从1月8号到4月23号。然后同时我们在3月、4月、5月的时候，我们也会开放相关的 AP review 课程，是针对5、6月的 AP 考试所做准备的。好，那另外来讲的话呢，我们刚刚也看到了，就是大学申请表上，现在已经开始有很多的私立学校已经开始就是希望能够看到学生的这个标化考试，特别是 SAT 的成绩。那如果你还没有开始准备 SAT， 然后也想要开始准备，或者是说想要开始针对考这个 PSAT 的话，也可以参考一下我们这个最新的开课时间是我们的秋季。好，秋季的这个开课时间，我们是从这个9月多开始。好，那如果你有需要的话，也可以跟各大学习中心联系，或者是呢，可以到学习中心去考一份模拟考卷，然后知道一下自己的这个现在的底子大概在什么地方。好，那另外来讲的话呢，刚刚张校长也讲到，就是怎么样可以 maximize your summers。对，然后 Amy 老师要不要大概介绍一下？
对，然后其实这些我们叫全球领袖实习项目，那我们也是有很多的学生去利用它这个 summer 和 winter 的时间去参加。那就是我们现在这个是我们 winter session 的时间，那我们有不同的地方。那我们之前有学生去到暑假刚刚回来的学生去到中国的湖南，我们是帮助当地的农户进行一个小额贷款这样的一个扶贫项目。其实它不仅仅是一个volunteering activity， 它更重要的是能够体现他学生在这个项目中获得的这个 leadership。那大家通过参加这个项目呢，它不仅仅可以获得这个总统义工小时数，那我们也是建议学生去申请每年的这个总统义工奖。那它对每个年级 年龄的学生都有不同的一个要求，那我们也可以帮助每年我们会有2次，一次是在春季，一次会是在秋季，帮助学生来申请这个总统义工奖。那对，还有一个是我们的这个尼泊尔的项目，它是集中在 sustainable development 的，然后是当地经济可持续发展相关的，也是联合国的7大议题之一。我们也是希望学生通过这些项目能够去发现它的 potential， 然后展现出来一个他的兴趣以及对当地社区的一个贡献。那这些活动其实都是可以填在之前跟大家说过这个 Common App 的这个 activity list 上的。所以如果学生没有太多活动的话，也是可以加入飞达参加我们这些项目。
对，而且这些项目都是属于 quality 非常好的项目，我们可以把它填在大学申请表 activity 比较上面的地方。对，
对。那我们今年暑假还是有很多学生去了不同的地方哈，那还有肯尼亚。那肯尼亚其实是跟 wildlife 相关的，那如果学生对 bio 或者对野生动物保护、当地环境保护以及人权方面，然后这些比较感兴趣的话，都可以去参加。还有就是 Costa Rica 更集中在这个 biodiversity 的这个生物多样性方面。那我们寒假也是 open 了所有这些项目，提供给到大家来进行选择性的一个参与。这些是在国外嘛，那如果学生想说在美国 local 想要去哪里的话，那其实我们现在还有一个这个 Arizona 的 biodiversity 的这个 project， 那这个是学生会，我们会有带着老师和学生一起去到 Arizona， 然后也是跟生物保护动物保护，然后生物相关的。那我们其实还会有一位特别的导师，他是 University of Arizona 的一位导师，会带着学生来一起做项目研究。
对，我们冬天有开设新的时间是12月28号到1月3号。对。好，然后另外来讲的话呢，因为马上就要开学了，所以其实IBMS 的各大学习中心也开始提供了很多就是在 In Center 里面会上的课程。那这些课程呢，它一般来讲都是帮助学生之后在作为各种竞赛类，或者是说各种的这个标化考试的准备，还有呢就是说学校的成绩这各方面。好，那这个的话就是我们今天只是举几个 sample 上来，那但是呢，如果你感兴趣，对任何课程你有这样的需求的话，欢迎打电话到各大学习中心。好，那像类似这种英文课程然后有专门的写作课程跟这个 reading 的课程，然后或者是呢我们马上要推出的这个 literary analysis 跟 language art 的这个课程，这些课程其实都是帮助学生之后在 AP 就是11年级时候上 AP literature 还有 AP language 打底的一个课程。另外来讲，还有就是很多学生就是说除了英文跟中文之外的这个，还有其他的这个 foreign language， 那也可以考虑一下像这个 Spanish 的这个课程。对，这个也对学生也是一个第二外语兴趣的一个培养。对，好，然后还有就是说，当然也是有不少的学生他们会希望说，放学过后能够有一个比较规律的一个作息时间，好，然后可以好好的把这个学校的功课完成，并且在老师的监督之下，能够比较有次序性、比较顺序，然后比较有逻辑的可以完成所有的这个作业。好，所以就是我们的学习中心现在也开设了就是 Homework Club， 然后可以一起的去报这样子。对，当然就是 public speaking 跟 speech debate 这样子的课程也是相当重要的，能够提升学生的口才呀，然后能够释放自信。在之后再做 interview coaching， 或者是说甚至真的在课外活动上面要成为一个很好的 leader 的话，也是相当重要。那我们有开放类似这种线下的这种演讲课程。
对，那除了这些暑假能够参加的课外活动之外呢，那其实我们平时也会为学生提供各种各样的一个课外活动的机会，那可以给大家简单介绍一下。
对，算是我们的学生社 local 的学生社团。
对 local 学生社团，那我想跟大家说一下这个 Future for Kenya 的这个社团，那它也是 founded by 之前一位学生，他是参加了这个肯尼亚的这个 program，那他回来以后就是见识到了当地的这样的一个人民的现状以及野生动物保护，那他就是成立了这个社团，希望 continually 能够做一些事情来帮助到他们。那我们这个社团目前是在做的是一个线上的一个支教，然后现在的 subject 会有 biology、science、music、art， 还有更多。那现在也是在持续的招募成员，然后会有每周的这样的一个线上支教。大家可以看到这些照片都是我们当地的学生非常热情的积极在学习，然后我们也是这样线上一个投屏的形式。那我们同时还成立了一个 fundraise， 那能够帮助到当地的一些学生，那他们还是特地举办了一个 ceremony 来庆祝这些我们从这边运来的一些物资，然后也是给我们做了一块展板来表示对大家的一个感谢。所以如果有感兴趣的学生可以加入我们这个社团。好，那我们其实还有很多，如果是对 music 感兴趣的学生，可以加入 Course for Change 的我们这个 Student Club， 会教授一些音乐相关的一个这个课程。
对，还有就是也有到比如说 Senior Center， 或者是说外面的一些这个会展上面，他们也会去做一些表演。
对，会到老人院去举办一些慈善音乐会。
对，
还有就是这个 Snap Club， 那我们是关注的是一个低收入的一个群体，当地他们的营养状态，还有他们的这个 food 的这个情况，那也是跟当地的 food bank 合作，然后会做一些 food donation 相关的一些。
对，是的。
好。那如果学生对 business 感兴趣的话，也可以加入我们的 business club。那我们就是会，大家会 teamwork， 会一起来准备每年的这个，比如说沃顿商赛呀，大家都是会有这样定期的一个 workshop 一起来筹备。还有就是 Girls in STEM Club， 那不仅仅是 girls， 那如果男生有兴趣的话，也可以参加，就是来加入我们这样的一个社团。对，还有很多，比如说 Music for Kids， 这个是音乐相关的一个社团，还有 Agents of Arts， 还有就是艺术相关的社团，所以就是大家可以根据自己的兴趣进行一个选择。对，还有这个是Sustainable Future， 那主要关注的是一个现在比较 popular 的一个药物毒品叫 Fentanyl， 然后我们也是和南湾的政府合作，然后来推广这样的人们的一个意识，然后也会做一些实地的调查和研究，来净化我们的社区。对，那除了这个呢，我们还有这个火箭队。火箭队我们是会定期的在我们的中心会有这样的一个 workshop， 有教练带着我们来 build 火箭的模型，然后也会到实地进行一个火箭的一个发射。然后我们也是会每年都会组队代表美国队参加国际火箭大赛。那如果对这方面感兴趣的学生也可以加入。
对，火箭队一直都是 Ivy Max 提倡很久的这个学生社团，而且我们也 run 很久了，就是对，已经好几年了。南加州、北加州其实都有火箭队，并且每年都会去参加这个火箭队的比赛，并且还会得奖。对，我记得好像去年是全国第4名嘛。对，所以就是我觉得喜欢 STEM 的学生不仅仅只是参加一般学校的这种 rocketry， 像是对不起，参加学校的这种 robotic， 像这种 rocketry 啊，还有像我们刚刚一开始提到这种 ham radio 这种学生社团，其实都是蛮独特的。对。
好，那这个呢，就是我们的这样一个申请的一个文书集。那如果大家想要看一下之前成功申请的学生的一些成功的申请案例的话，也可以是在 Amazon 上购买的这本文书链接来看一看大家写的一些 story。
对，12年级的学生应该要真的人手要一本的。
好，那现在我们也开通了这个飞达微信公众号平台，我们会定期发表一些文章，关于一些比如说 UC 的这些申请 checklist 啊，然后最新最热点的 topic， 还有一些干货分享给到大家呢。如果大家可以扫码关注我们的微信公众平台，也会有一些最新的一些项目信息 update 在上面。对。 那除此之外，我们还有这个小红书平台，对，还有现在这个 Instagram 的平台，那大家也是可以进行一个关注，我们会定期更新内容，然后希望能够帮助到大家。对，这个是我们的联系方式。那如果有感兴趣的家长，可以扫屏幕上的这个二维码来加入我们的这个咨询站，我们也会是定期更新我们的一些项目信息以及最新资讯。那如果是在北加的家长和学生可以联系我们，然后南加我们也是有，然后美国之外的地区也可以发送 email 给我们，然后我们会有老师来 reach out 到大家来帮助大家解答一些问题。
对，好。那因为我们今天时间已经到8点25分，我们今天是干货满满的讲座，所以就是暂时间可能就没有办法再开放就是答疑的时间了。那如果说线上的家长，我相信你们听完了大学申请表，听完了这个 essay 哈，还有各个学生也是一样，可能都会有各式各样不同的问题。那如果是已经是 Ivy Max VIP， 就是在我们这边做这个 counseling 的学生的话，不用担心，你会有专门所属的这个 application manager 来跟你进行，就是到时候会有一个填表1对1的 review， 还有你专门的文书老师来带着你把这个文章写好。对，那如果还没有开始加入我们的家庭，可以打电话跟我们的这个就是最近的学习中心预约一个1对1的升学资讯。然后对，我们今天的讲座就到此结束。那非常感谢 Amy 老师、张校长还有 Sebastian 老师，
谢谢大家，也希望大家持续关注我们每月的 webinar。那咱们下期再见。
好，拜拜。
李老师，谢谢 Amy 老师，拜拜。
拜。